Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. One of the two Republican members of the January 6th committee just offered a stark personal warning about the threat of political violence in this country, a topic he knows a thing or two about.
This threat that came in, it was mailed to my house. We got it a couple days ago, and it threatens to execute me as well as my wife and 5-month-old child. I've never seen or had anything like that. There are people that there is violence in the future, I'm going to tell you. And until we get a grip on telling people the truth, we can't expect any differently.
That is Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. He has been in Congress for more than a decade. For the vast majority of that time, he has acted and voted like a conservative Republican, which is what he is. He voted in line with Donald Trump's position 90% of the time. But after the attempted coup on January 6th, Kinzinger was one of 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Trump. And since then, he has been essentially excommunicated from his party. Last fall, Kinzinger announced he would not run for re-election, vowing to wage a, quote, broader fight nationwide against Trumpism. And that has made some people very, very angry. Yesterday, Congressman Kinzinger posted this letter, the one that he mentioned in that interview. It's a handwritten death threat. It is addressed to his wife and mailed to their private home. The letter says that Kinzinger, quote, broke his oath and he sold his soul. Now, Kinzinger knows, as well as anyone, that violence and the threat of violence are the point for the far-right wing of the Republican Party. They're not accidental, they're not ancillary to what's happening, nor what was happening on January 6th, as the committee on which Kinzinger serves has shown in their public hearings. Likewise, violence is not ancillary or accidental for Donald Trump and his MAGA movement. It has always been part of Trump's politics, plainly right there in front of us from the earliest days of his presidential campaign, when protesters were repeatedly assaulted at his rallies. And Trump urged his supporters to, quote, knock the crap out of them, promising to pay their legal fees for assault. This violent, thuggish intimidation, this menace, it's one of the tools the Trump faction of the right-wing American politics uses to achieve its aims. That's the picture that has emerged from the January 6th committee, as well as the committee has unearthed more and more evidence. The violence on the day of the 6th was planned. It was intentional, right? It wasn't just some big collective temper tantrum. That violence was reported to Donald Trump. He knew about it. He refused to do anything about it. In fact, he did the opposite. Worse than nothing, in response to reports of the violence, he sent a tweet condemning his Vice President Mike Pence, and even, according to the committee, suggested that Pence might deserve to be hanged. Donald Trump said that knowing a violent mob had built a gallows with the news to the Capitol grounds. Said mob was chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." And again, understand this. Understand what we've learned here. The rioters there, you see them here. We play this image all the time. This is not, again, this is it's not a spontaneous eruption of can't take it any more anger, right? Yes, it's partly that. But the rioters were trying to do something. They were using that threat as a means to an end. They were trying to physically intimidate Mike Pence, either to get him to change his mind about overturning the election results, or to get him out of the building by chasing him out of there, or to get him out of the way one way or another. That was the point. They were very, very clear about this.
I'm hearing reports that Pence caved. I'm telling you, if Pence caved, we're going to drag motherfuckers through the streets. You politicians are going to get drugged through the streets. Bring it out!
Bring out Pence!
Bring him out!
Bring out Pence!
Bring him out!
Bring out Pence! Mike Pence has betrayed the United States of America! You, Mike Pence! Mike Pence has betrayed this president, and he has betrayed the people of the United States, and we will never, ever forget!
Yeah!
Of course, the most ferocious, targeted, violent vitriol we heard on January 6th wasn't directed at Democrats. It was directed at Mike Pence. And it was directed at Mike Pence because Donald Trump wanted it directed at Mike Pence, because Donald Trump convinced the mob that Pence had betrayed the MAGA cause, that he had stabbed them in the back. In fact, when I confronted Republican Alabama Congressman Mo Brooks about the horrifying violence on the 6th, just recently on the show, the violence that began shortly after, remember, he told the crowd at Trump's rally to, quote, start taking down names and kicking ass, he claimed, well, I was just talking about the Republican establishment, the Pence contingent.
I'm talking about beating Republicans in the 2022 and 2024 election. That's whose names we're going to take down and whose derrieres we're going to kick, okay? So anybody who was there who looks at the two sentences in a two-sentence paragraph knows what I'm talking about. It had nothing to do with what occurred at the United States Capitol.
What do you
I was talking
think?
about beating the rhinos.
Right.
I'm a conservative. We're fighting with the establishment wing of the Republican Party, the rhinos. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, how could I be urging violence? I'm talking about the rhinos. Well, yeah, right, of course, exactly, yes. Mike Pence was the rhino. I mean, not in any real sense, right? Just on that day, because he didn't overturn American constitutional democracy. A Republican in name only rhino. That is what he was branded on that day in the view of Trump and his supporters. That's where the anger was directed, the anger that Mo Brooks was stoking. And it was stoked because he, again, would not overturn the election for them. And in some ways, the far-right faction is now deploying that same thirst for violence as a means of exerting control in the broader Republican Party. On the far right, the desire for violence has only intensified in the aftermath of January 6th. And just a few days ago, Donald Trump reiterated the same narrative about Mike Pence stabbing him in the back. He told the crowd at a Nashville conference that Pence, quote, did not have the courage to act. And then today, you may have seen the news of what we're going to show you next. We sort of wrestled with how we're going to talk about it. An outrageous threat of violence that comes from Missouri's disgraced ex-governor, now Republican candidate for Senate, a guy by the name of Eric Greitens. Greitens' name might ring a bell because he was a rising star in the Republican Party until 2018 when he resigned in disgrace, called to resign by other Republican statewide offices. It wasn't like a Democratic wish hunt. And the reason were allegations he had sexually assaulted and attempted to blackmail a woman with whom he was having an affair, a hairdresser. She says he took pictures of her and wouldn't give them back. Criminal charges filed against him were later dropped, and Greitens went on to launch his bid for another statewide office, Senate. And then earlier this year, allegations of abuse from his ex-wife were revealed in a court filing. In a sworn affidavit, his ex-wife claimed that his behavior, quote, included physical violence toward our children, such as the cuffing our then 3-year-old son across the face at dinner table in front of me and yanking him around by his hair. She also described an incident in 2019 when one of their sons returned from a visit with Greitens, quote, with swollen face, bleeding gums, and loose tooth. He said Dad had hit him. However, Eric said they were roughhousing. It had been an accident. Greitens denies these allegations. Regardless of your political ideology, I think it's fair to say it's not the kind of person you'd think voters want representing them. And credit where due to the voters, primary voters, Republican voters in Missouri, Greitens has been flailing. He's fending off multiple challengers in the primary, desperately seeking an endorsement from Donald Trump in that humiliating, abject, cringe-inducing way we've all become so familiar with. But Greitens thinks he has an ace up his sleeve, and that ace is the intentionally outrageous performance of fascist violence. And so in that context, today, he put out an ad. It's a web-only ad, right? They're not putting points on TV. It urges his supporters to, quote, order your rhino hunting permit today. Again, that dumb, silly acronym, right? So it's a dumb play on words, right? You're hunting a rhino, right? R-H-I-N-O. It uses the same term as Mo Brooks, but Greitens is not going on a safari here in terms of the direction this ad goes with the metaphor. And we're not going to show you this ad because it's essentially tantamount to violent incitement. But these are still images from it, so you get a sense of what it portrays, right? Greitens rolls up to an average-looking house with what looks like a SWAT team, although in this case, a right-wing death squad. They break into the house carrying long guns, and Greitens says to the camera, quote, join the MAGA crew, get a rhino hunting permit. They are looking for Republicans in name only to murder in their homes, is the point of the ad. Now, he knows what he's doing. They all know what they're doing, right? As many people pointed out, the ad was designed to provoke attention. Again, Greitens is desperate for it, especially from Donald Trump, desperate from members of the Republican base who might vote for him. His campaign manager claims, quote, the response from our America First voters to our groundbreaking ad has been overwhelming and supportive. They say anyone who has a problem with it is either, quote, either lying or dumb. So again, right, clearly calculated attention grab from a desperate candidate who's facing all sorts of allegations of some of the worst kind of behavior you could expect from a man. But also, like, Eric Greitens might be a U.S. Senator. I hate to break it to you. This is a major candidate who may very well get the nomination, and if he does, has a really good shot at becoming a United States Senator. And in the ad that he put together and put out, which he thinks is calculated to get him support, he is explicitly exciting murder against his political foes within his own party. Like, let's break down the door of Republicans who differ from me and put a bullet in their heads. That's the ad. So this is where we are right now in 2022 in American political culture. The hang Mike Pence chant, if it's echoing in your ears, you're not wrong. It hasn't gone away.